And this is Sherry Turner, and we're both with Credo CFOs and CPAs. We do both fractional CFO and a lot of tax services, big tax practice, obviously. And the class is called Stop Losing Clients. And I wasn't sure really how to title it, but the fact is the entire practice that we have and everything we do is really based on people coming to us from other professions. Not solicited necessarily, but they were coming to us and saying that they were not getting tax strategy and tax planning, and that's how we got a lot of our clients. So when I say stop losing clients, I know you're losing clients, or somebody is, because we're getting it. All right? And we try to talk about how you can prevent from doing that. So I think part of the issue with trying to provide tax strategy services is obviously our profession takes a lot of stamina, and a lot of times we run out. I got this little video clip that I just thought was like the perfect representation of sort of clients talking to us and kind of our attitude. You know, sometimes maybe some of it is a little bit unsaid, but I think everybody can kind of relate to it. So I'm just going to play it. This is kind of fun. This is from a movie called Office Space.
Would you walk us through a typical day for you?
Yeah.
Great.
Well, I generally come in at least 15 minutes late. I use the side door. That way Lumberg can't see me. And after that, I just sort of space out for about an hour. Till I'm
Space out?
Yeah, I just stare at my desk. But it looks like I'm working. I do that for probably another hour after lunch, too. I'd say in a given week, I probably only do about 15 minutes of real, actual work.
Peter, would you be a good sport and indulge us and just tell us a little more?
Oh, yeah. Let me tell you something about TPS reports. The thing is, Bob, it's not that I'm lazy. It's that I just don't care.
Don't care?
It's a problem of motivation, all right? Now, if I work my ass off and Initech ships a few extra units, I don't see another dime. So where's the motivation?
And here's something else, Bob. I have 8 different bosses right now.
I beg your pardon?
8 bosses.
8?
8, Bob. So that means that when I make a mistake, I have 8 different people coming by to tell me about it. That's my only real motivation, is not to be hassled. That and the fear of losing my job. But you know, Bob, that'll only make someone work just hard enough not to get fired.
Would you bear with me for just a second, please?
Okay.
What if, and believe me, this is so hypothetical, but what if you were offered some kind of a stock option equity sharing program? Would that do anything for you?
I don't know, I guess. Listen, I'm gonna go. It's been really nice talking to both of you guys.
Absolutely. The pleasure's all on this side of the table, trust me.
Good luck with your layoffs, all right? I hope your firings go really well.
Excellent. Great.
In the movie, they're asking him what he does in a typical day, et cetera, et cetera. And I always thought about clients, when they talk about our fees, et cetera, they might say, what are you actually doing for me? Why do you have to charge me this much money? This only takes like a half hour, right? You ever heard that? Especially when you tell them that they owe tax, right? It's not the funnest conversation. And I think a lot of times, we don't really want to answer that, right? So we kind of get maybe a little sarcastic in our mind, or there's a motivation sort of issue, right? I mean, if there was a motivation behind doing tax strategy for people, we do it, right? But when you're trying to do 1,000 returns and you're barely keeping your head above water, it's pretty hard to add strategy to the mix, right? Knowing also that that kind of advice carries liability. So doing that when you're tired, frustrated, they won't pay for it, et cetera, knowing that to execute it, it's going to take a lot of time and energy, right? Would you agree? So it poses a big challenge. There's really no way that it can be provided unless you switch the way you run your practice. So I started with the why, because should always start with the why. 2 points that I want to make here besides the rest of it. Some of this is stuff you've probably heard before. One of the points I want to make is that we're going to show you how to smooth your hours over a longer period of time. We're going to show you how to kind of redo your calendar so that you can ease it out and smooth it over time. It's good for you and your staff, right? Each relationship has a time expense. It takes time, right? You have to get back to that person, et cetera, et cetera. And then even if you get back to them on a minimal level, it's not really a relationship, right? It's more just, they're kind of calling in the customer service and you're just trying to get done with it so you can get on to the returns. Just to kind of kick off what we do at our firm, how we provide tax strategy services, we have players on both sides of the table. So on our side of the table, we have, of course, us, we have billable staff, we have non-billable admin staff, and we have strategic partners, which is critical, and I'll talk about that as we go here. There's not a shift away from tax compliance or quality tax prep. In fact, it's the opposite. It needs to be upgraded. So you can do tax strategy, but when you do tax strategy and you're really mitigating taxes, there are risks involved. And you have to do it correctly. And if you don't, then the tax strategy is not really any good, right? You get audited and stuff, it gets blown out, like a lot of I's cross T's. So tax prep allows you to offer tax strategy to clients while they don't have to take on a lot of risk. Does that make sense? You have to tell them that your tax preparation is solid, more solid than the usual firm, or more, you've upgraded it so that you can do tax strategy and keep them safe. So who's on the other side of the table? They have to make enough income to make strategy worthwhile. So you have to really change kind of who you let into the gate. You have to get used to turning away a lot of clients. You know, there's only certain people who can help. You have to be careful with that because you'll end up taking on these clients and they'll take your capacity and you won't be able to serve a $1 million client effectively. So you have to get used to saying no more often. However, it's a good thing because if you can find a partner that can do the prep with you, you can forge a really nice relationship. So find a good partner, and sometimes they'll have a high income client that needs tax strategy or they're not comfortable with the tax return, they'll send them your way, right? So it's not that you're not losing any business, right? You're just sending it to someone else and it'll reciprocate. You have to get them, the last part is you have to get them to engage. If they don't engage with you on their end, it's going to be really hard to make it work. The clients that we were touching, it was the clients that were touching us. That was the most, right, that was the best correlation or causation indicator that we could find. So the clients that are calling us, think about that, that's kind of scary, right? When you have, what do they call it, a needy client? It's not a needy client. In this new service model, they're constantly giving you information to do your job. You need somebody that's going to engage and become a partner with you in this. Okay, so if we go to the when, is you have to basically forget everything you've ever learned about tax season. When people find out that in April, et cetera, we're not as busy as other people. And it's not really, we felt a lot of extensions anyway because they're high income. But it's so smoothed out that we just don't have that mad rush of the busy season. So you have to kind of rethink the calendar and how you run your business. Tax strategy is, you have to have a process for tax strategy. I think a lot of people think that tax strategy is more art than science. But you actually have to have a process or you're going to miss a lot of stuff. You have to be methodical and you have to align expectations with the client. You're going to have more variables now and more at stake. Now you can make a mistake and cost them $100,000. Right? So you have to have processes that also involve them and align them in setting expectations. The good part of that is when you're doing planning, what we do is we're effectively forecasting a tax return. Okay, so like right now is our planning season. We try to get all of our clients into the office June, July, August. And we're starting to do planning, figuring out the year, figuring out what do we need to follow up on in the third quarter, fourth quarter, right? We're basically setting the stage so we know when we need to get a hold of them. And at the end, when we have a tax strategy, we have here's your forecasted tax return. That's a great quality control, right? Because you can pull that out when your staff is prepping returns. Look at variances. What's the variance? Why? Why do we have variance here? You definitely have to follow a process, and you have to have a system. And that took us a while to figure out. I want you to talk about that a little, sure, if you would, because you have to really figure out your own process to do this. This is not something simple. If it was simple, then there would be a great software out there already.
Well, I know that everybody wants to hear that we've been doing this for 20 years. We haven't been doing this for 20 years, but we have been doing it for about 5 years. And the first year went okay. The second year went really, really well. And the third year, it was like, why weren't we always doing this? So I will tell you, it's more difficult to convert an existing client to this process than it is a new client. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. If you walk in tomorrow and you tell Jane Smith that you would like for her to triple her price, you would like for her to sign her engagement letter in June, she's going to get a whole lot more out of it, but you know she's only been paying you $750 and you'd like to charge her $3,500. Jane Smith is not going to be excited about that. Jane Smith is going to say, well, why weren't you always doing that for me?
Now we're going to save you money.
I will say that the conversion rate was probably closer to like 30%. We were hoping for 60 or 70. It was more like 30. What we did end up doing is we did get rid of a lot of the tax prep only people. We made some very strategic decisions. We also offered it for free as a transitionary thing. Kept their price the same as if it were tax prep and said, hey, if you like it next year, this is what the price is going to be, but hey, let's just do a beta test with it. Those were the higher conversion ones, but I'm not going to tell you, you're going to walk back in and all 1,000 of your clients are going to want to switch to this. Not going to happen. If it happens for you, could you come and explain to me how to do that?
Totally, so.
Okay, but I don't want to get too far down that path. But here's what we did. So Dan comes to me with this crazy idea. He says, what if we sent engagement letters in June? It's like, why don't we send them in June? What are you talking
Because
about?
we need the money.
He's not lying. So, but what we started thinking about was, what if we turn the entire process on its ear? So what we do is we start the process in June. And even though we run through extension season, and yeah, your process might go all the way to October the next year. Think about it as a year, right? So I start the process in June. I send you your engagement letter in June. I have a consistent deliverable year after year. You get and every year I'm re-onboarding you. Every year you're going to get an invitation for your first big strategy session. These are working sessions. I don't assume that I know the answer. I got a pretty good idea. You guys all have a pretty good idea, right? But I don't assume that I know, and I set myself up so that I can make changes on the fly as we talk. Send up quick follow-ups, and then come back to them with a shorter 30-minute session, again, working session. Have them send me their pay stubs. Let's see if we withheld them at the right amount, that kind of thing, at the end of the year. And the deliverable is the same year after. It shows you how it changed. You got point A, point B. How much risk do you want to take? This one, do you make a choice, right? Start with what you know and expand from there. It's really, really a great thing. Here's what I know can be done. I have a fiduciary relationship. I get no benefit from anything, any tax strategy that anyone does. There's a Chinese wall, but also we use strategic partners. I don't know how to do some of these things. I know that they can be done. I know what the tax implication is, but then I'll sit in the meeting with them, with the partner, but I don't have to know about that stuff. And in fact, it's better that I don't. I'm not a financial advisor. That's not my job. My job is to tell you what you could do and show you what the impacts are going to be. Show you what it would look like if you did nothing, what it would look like if you do this one thing. Some of the stuff's easy. You have a qualified plan, you make sure you're using reasonable compensation, have you optimized your salary to make sure that you're taking good, QBI deductions. Some of the stuff is, super low-hanging fruit. Some of the stuff is much more complicated. Do you need to do something like conservation easements? Do you need to do something like, captive reinsurance? When you get into those higher things, I'm calling a buddy. I like to use my phone a friend. So, and then you pass it on to them and let them handle those kinds of things. You want to make sure you have partners you can trust.
You're not going to be perfect. So there's no perfect tax strategy. And you have to tell your client that. It's like, look, I know you think I know everything. I know you think that I can do it perfect, but it's just not really possible. You guys ever watch The Sopranos? That show? Remember that show? Mm-hmm. So she was talking about it a little bit earlier, and what you have to do with your client, you have a sit down, right? They have to come in, you have a sit down, you have a conversation, you have to talk back and forth. It is the secret sauce in getting information out. And if you think about it, a big problem with tax strategy is extracting information. Oh yeah, and let's talk about pricing, because if you can't price out the work, it doesn't happen, right? It's just not sustainable. One of the big problems was obviously time. And if you want time, you have to have money. Do you agree? So we had to figure out a way to price things differently, and actually it is very stressful on the pricing side. And the reason it's stressful is it's not stressful to negotiate. You have to be really careful with that kind of stuff because you can leave money on the table. Now, when you talk about pricing with these new clients coming in, you have to really lay out for them how you're going to add value, and you have to assess how much you know that you can safely commit to them, right? So a lot of times somebody will come in and they'll give us all their stuff. We obviously can't do all the tax strategy work right there, so there's a little bit of a trust factor. But we can look at things really quickly and say, hey, we know we can save you $100,000. Then you start talking about price at that point. A common client will come to us, and they'll come in and they'll say, hey, I want a fresh look at things to see what can be done with my taxes this year. They just want a fresh look at things. And let's talk about what we think we can do for this person, right? And what your process is to go through it and say, yeah, we can save them at least this amount, right? And then we can go back and talk to them about that. But you want to, they're going to come back and be skeptical. Okay, so if somebody comes to you and you say, I can save you $100,000. You can't expect them to believe you, right? So you may have to take them a little further. You may have to give them some detail, but you can never do the whole thing. You can't do the entire strategy without the pain, right? So when you're demonstrating that to them, you have to talk to them about price as well. You can't demonstrate value and then talk about price later. You have to do it right then and start negotiating. So when we would look at someone like this, we would be looking at, is this W-2 from what a job? Is this capital gain from an outside thing? Is this real estate, et cetera, et cetera? And we would tell them that, hey, look, we can defer all this capital gain, we think, because you said it's going to happen in 2 months. On the W-2, we can consult with you and say, hey, that's a little bit high for someone in escort, et cetera, et cetera. We can kind of calculate how much we can save for them. And then we come back to it, and they say, well, what happens if we defer all the capital gain? You say, well, you're not going to pay any tax on it, et cetera, et cetera. And they go, well, my CPA said I'm going to pay $600,000. I don't sell it. You're not, right? We can do that for you. Now they start buying in, right? They sign up with you, and then you have that initial meeting. You have to, in that initial meeting, you have to establish the constraints and their goals, right? Because strategies involve money and risk. Let's just say you get a client that's going to pay a certain amount of money and you have all these great strategies. How do you execute all that? Well, we found you can't. you have to have partners that work with you for all these strategies. So once you've got a strategy that you have in your toolbox, you have to walk all the way through and obviously figure out how you're going to execute it, but we haven't figured out how to get enough time to do all that. So if you have 8 strategies on one client, there's no way you can get all those done. So you have to find the right strategic partners to execute all this stuff.
Our contact information should be available within the materials. Feel free to reach out if you guys have any questions or have any thoughts that you think might help us. We're very open to that as well. Thank you very much for your time.